This episode contains spoilers for The Wolf Among Us and the Fables comic book series.
Hello and welcome to the Push to Smart Water Cooler. This episode we are featuring the very last entry in Season 1 of Telltale Games' The Wolf Among Us, the critically acclaimed series based off Bill Willingham's wildly popular Fables. This episode picks up right where we left off. We're right in with the Crooked Man, and Bigby just lit his cigarette, and then the game happens.
I thought it was quite short. I was quite surprised.
Yeah, one of my biggest issues with this episode, and you're probably going to hear me talk about a lot of the issues I had with the ending, is that the pacing was terrible.
It was.
It was really bad. And I thought that this was kind of a weird episode, but let's just go straight into the game.
Okay.
We get in there, and the Crooked Man is like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a regular guy doing a business. I am free of sin and blemish. And Georgie, he's bad. That guy with the tattoos. Did you choose Georgie as who you thought? I chose the Crooked Man because I was like...
I think I did too.
Because I felt like probably Georgie because he's the sleaziest. But ultimately it's going to come back to the Crooked Man. So that's what I chose. And then he was like, no, it was Georgie. And I was like, damn it. And then things kind of escalate here and we don't really learn much.
Bloody Mary makes an awesome entrance.
Oh my god, Bloody Mary, yes.
That's going to be pretty much the episode. Like, oh, this episode's kind of, oh my god, Bloody Mary's amazing.
And now she did. But actually probably not because, like, come on. She is such a popular fable. So I did like the chase scene. I thought it was cool. I didn't really understand the bar at the bottom. I'm guessing it was some sort of timer.
It was weird. It was kind of like the way that one of the things I really liked about one of the past episodes was they had kind of a timer, like telling you what time it is. And they kind of, when you're searching for Crane, it's like, okay, well, it's, this time now. And there's a sense that, okay, I have to get there. But the reality is it's Telltale. Everything is carefully constructed. You're going to make each beat. Nothing is actually truly timed except for your conversation choices. So in this, and I felt like it worked a bit. I was fooled a bit by it during the crane chase sequence in a previous episode, but I wasn't fooled by it here. It was just it just seems superfluous and really easy to ignore.
Yeah. The
chase scene was cool in theory. I had a couple problems with it. One was the bar, which just didn't do anything. And then the other was...
Well, it's like if you're having a... like a high-tension chase scene. The chase scene is all you need. You don't need that signifier of they could get away, because that should be...
Especially since it doesn't actually signify that. Yeah. It is just empty, meaningless, gooey filler thing.
I'm sure if you hit the wrong buttons or something, there's probably like a failure state. But
what... There wasn't really even a chance to hit buttons.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, you only had one or two targets. But the other thing, just kind of narratively, that I thought was weird was the idea that he was giving chase in his kind of pseudo-werewolf form. And I had no idea where in New York they were, because they enter the door in the middle of Central Park, and that is not in Falbletown, to my knowledge. No. And one of the big things that is especially Bigby's responsibility is making sure the mundane people, the Mundies, don't find out about the existence of Fables. And here he is running around New York as a werewolf.
Well, I thought that was intentional. Like, that they were supposed to show, oh, he's so angry, he doesn't even care. And besides, it was the 80s. I mean...
Weird things happen.
Yeah.
I guess that I didn't buy that. Especially because the treatment of Bigby's wolf form is very strange throughout the series and kind of inconsistent with the way it's treated in the comics. Because in this one, later, kind of getting ahead, we finally see his true wolf form, which was awesome. But in the comics, he kind of switches between that and his human form kind of as needed. Where in this game, there seems to be kind of some kind of weird...
hulking out.
Right. This kind of stigma against it, like you don't want to lose control. When it's like, it's not the supernatural ability he's giving into, that's his actual form. Like, it's just him it's no longer just a tool for him. And it seemed a little bit more... like it was a tool for him and he was more comfortable with it in this episode, especially later on. But the lead up to it didn't quite connect for me.
And then we're chasing Georgie and Vivian, and you can land on one of two cars. I landed on Georgie's because I had no idea that the Crooked Man was in the other car. I don't even remember seeing that other car.
Yeah, they kind of cut because I thought it was like either you'd hit the car or you'd miss and have to like be on some civilian's car.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to the Crooked Man looking at you from the other car like, what's up? And it's like,
and I was like, shit.
Darn it.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe that was just because they really want people to go to Georgie. And I don't know if you land on the Crooked Man's car, if they like swerve you off onto Georgie's anyway or whatnot.
Right. I'm really interested to see, especially because at the end of the episode when they get the special stats, they list characters that are deceased. And I was wondering, obviously some are always going to be deceased like Faith, but I was wondering if maybe when I saw that with George, I was like, I wonder if there's a way for him to live. Like if you don't, stalk him and exacerbate. Yeah. That thing. If you don't make the situation worse.
Yeah. And then we get to the pudding and pie, which was another weird segment.
I think we kind of talked about earlier the pacing's weird, and I think part of the reason the pacing is weird is last episode was very much kind of a bridge episode where it kind of establishes the stakes like, between Big B and Snow, and then with the Crooked Man and Big B. And then this episode, instead of really raising those, it was just like an exposition dump after exposition dump. And it didn't feel like it was very dramatically satisfying.
Yeah.
And it really came to a head in this scene. Though, I want to point out, one of our commenters totally called this Riviera Nightingale. She called a couple of things that happened in this episode, but one of the things she said was, I actually suspected what the ribbons did based on a fairy tale I found about a girl who wore a ribbon, and then her husband unties it and her head falls off, which turns out being exactly where Telltale goes with this, which is we go to the tale with the girl with the ribbon who ends up being Vivian.
Yeah. A lot of things. So this is one of those scenes where I really started to dislike the episode, and I'm not sure if I ever really came back from it. And that is because I didn't feel like my choices in the discussion really mattered that much, and I didn't really feel like there was ever a choice that I was like, okay, that is the choice that I want to make. I am saying this is me. And so it was just like, okay, I'm just going to try and keep her from killing herself. But she does anyways. Then you can shorten Georgie's pain, or you can let him suffer. If you let him suffer, like I did.
Oh, good. I'm glad, because I didn't.
Yeah. Oh, no. There's an option where Bigby can say, I'm not a killer, even though he's the one who stabbed Georgie in the first place. And even though he's the one who killed him and is now walking away to make his pain worse, which,
I did choose to end his suffering, and it didn't seem like a very effective way to end suffering.
What happened?
He like, gets his werewolf claws and just, like, goes in and grabs the insides are already coming outside and just, like, twists around.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Jesus.
It's like, that's not really...
Here, let me do a favor for you.
Yeah. Oh, Bigby. Yeah, but I totally get where you're coming from with, like, having none of the options seemed quite right. They were either very accusational, like, there was no way to kind of state, okay, I understand the Crooked Man is behind this. I understand that this is a really crappy situation, but we got to do something, and especially because when you're not controlling Bigby, he stabs Georgie.
Yeah. It's
like there's no coming back from that. You just kind of have to deal with it. And one thing I was reading, I think it was on Tumblr, someone brought up the really good point was that the reason the murder mystery works is because you see it from Snow White's perspective, where she doesn't have all the, like, the superhuman wolf abilities that Bigby does. Yeah. And so Bigby has things like super smell and all these things where he can tell if people are lying. And, so there's no reason for him to be strung along the way he is in this murder mystery. And I think after reading that, I mean, there's a point where you kind of have to let it go in order to enjoy the game. But I felt like in this scene especially, that was in the back of my mind the whole time. It's like, Bigby should know better. Yeah. From Georgie, we go immediately to the warehouse. Yeah. Where Bloody Mary is.
And I have mixed feelings about this. I loved, because you were talking about how Bloody Mary is kind of used as a boogeyman, and she is totally a boogeyman in the warehouse.
Yeah.
And it's so cool. And I felt like another thing that was really cool is maybe I'm just bad, but a lot of times when they'd have the on-screen ways to like kind of miss her attacks, like I did not have enough time. Like she was attacking right as I got like a half second to press it, and so I never got any of those.
And it was funny because right before that, I was thinking, like, you know, the QuickTime events in this episode seem really, like, ridiculously easy. And there's no way you can miss one. And then you get to the Bloody Mary scene. Yeah. And I was missing stuff left and right.
Yeah. And then you have this big fight with the kind of revamped Bloody Mary monster. And all of her mirror images. Which was cool. But my main problem, and this isn't to do with the story or anything, is, you know, Telltale Games kind of has a history with their games kind of lagging or having some technical difficulties. And so when I play a game and they're trying to make a really dramatic sequence with like slow motion or QuickTime or just anything with timing, when a game starts lagging, it's totally, you know, all your work has been demolished. It doesn't. And that's something that happened with the fight with Bloody Mary. That very last scene where you're trying to like grab her in your mouth as she's trying to come down and kill you. Like there was a bit of lag there, and I was like, well, I've just been taken out of it.
Oh, I didn't have that. And you play on the PlayStation 3, right? Okay, I play on my Mac. I didn't have that problem here, so I don't know if that's like a PlayStation 3 issue. That's interesting. Yeah. This is also when he becomes the big bad wolf, which was awesome to finally see. And
then we kind of interact with the Crooked Man. He's got his silver bullet gun, and you can just knock it out of his hand.
Yeah.
And so did you kill him? I'm guessing not, because like me, you just really want some effing answers.
Yeah.
And so from that, you take him to... You don't really get any answers here. And then you take him to the kind of trial, and you don't get many answers there either.
That kind of makes me wonder if you can really kill him at the Foundry anyway, because what else would happen at that scene without him there?
I am genuinely curious about that. I almost want to replay.
Yeah, there's a lot of points in this episode where it's like, I wonder if that changed anything, because we're kind of late in the game now, and if it's like if it's going to matter, it's going to matter now.
Yeah. But then you have this weird trial. That was another one of those points where it just kind of felt like part of me thought it was anticlimactic, and part of me really liked the idea that it's coming down to the politics of the situation, and you have all these different people from all these walks of life, and they've been affected by the Crooked Man in different ways, and they've been affected by Big B and Snow's politics in different ways, and I liked that, but it felt very manufactured. Like,
it did.
Suddenly it was like, oh, we're with the Crooked Man, and now we're with you. Now we're with the Crooked Man again. And you've won the crowd. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. And it was like, that was the only time that ever happened. And it was like, I was like, oh, I didn't realize this was like, this was something we're tracking. When is this going to happen? Like, do I ever lose the crowd?
I thought that it was something that they would track, but I don't know how it would change. I mean, maybe like they would have gone mob mentality and like just killed him. I don't know. Again, none of the answers at that point either felt very right. I think
part of it is, again, like we kind of referred to the last episode as a bridge episode, and another commenter, Bleeders, pointed out that there's a really interesting parallel between what Snow complains about Crane doing in the first episode in the taxi, where she basically says he doesn't have any, capacity for empathy and just sends her out to handle these problems and ultimately turn these poor people away. But then in episode 4, when we really see kind of Snow come down one way or the other on her politics, we see her, as Bleeders puts it, she sends Big B to deliver the messages to Toad and Colin and things like that because she's busy. So for instance, with Toad, she's busy dealing with Bluebeard, so she's like, you have to tell him to go to the farm.
Yeah.
As she says in her comment, I'm not going to say she's becoming Crane, but I would say she's starting to act a whole lot like him, even if her actions are driven from a different set of values, which is really interesting. And I do see how that was set up in the 4th episode, and I don't think that this episode addresses that well enough, in part because our choices are basically either side with Snow or be defensive. Like, there is no other way.
I do like that it did kind of pay off. I don't feel like it was executed as well as it could have been.
Right.
And again, this is, these issues are not something that I've ever really seen in a game, tackled in a game. And that's really cool, and I love that for what it is. But it just felt kind of a little bit messy.
Right.
I felt like I was kind of on this roller coaster train wreck that I was kind of watching instead of actually being the character. So how did your decision to destroy the tree come back?
Oh, they rubbed it in my face.
I know.
Yeah.
That was something that when I was playing it, I think my boyfriend was like, oh, Stacey's going to hear that.
Yeah, that was one of the things. He turned the crowd, I guess, against me by bringing up how he had, helped Auntie Greenleaf by getting her tree for her from the Homelands, helping her, earn a living to have this piece of herself. And then Snow and I barged in and just burned it down. And everybody, like Beauty and the Beast, who I just wanted to shut up because, like, you guys shouldn't even be here. They were like, why would you do that? It's like, you weren't there.
I know. Beauty and the Beast this episode, they were just kind of like...
They just gasped and sided with whoever last
spoke. They were very reactionary, and I was just kind of like, could you guys just quiet for a second? You are probably the least affected.
I know.
You have to work at a sleazy inn. That's all. I got kind of laid into for beating the crap out of Tweedle during my interrogation.
That's what I was wondering.
And it was one of those things where it's like... It's one of those things where, like, Snow was... there and she didn't stop it, just like Crane, and my response was, actually, we thought she was dead.
Yeah, it's like she was like declared dead at that point. And then of course after you won the crowd or whatever, the ultimate deciding point is Nerissa, who barges in, who can now speak freely because of Vivian's death, and gives the Crooked Man a piece of her mind.
Nerissa, she's quite a character this episode.
She is.
And she was one of my favorite things in this episode, actually. And mostly for the end reveal, which we'll get into later.
Yeah.
But, she's like, I heard it. He was like, kill them. And Georgie just was doing his job. And that's what ultimately puts the crowd against him. And it almost makes me wonder, like, what's the point of winning the crowd if Nerissa's going to barge in anyways and get everybody on the side? Because Nerissa can't die. And she's going to barge in no matter what. So
it kind of reminded me, when I saw the winning the crowd thing, it reminded me of the Lands meet from Dragon Age Origins, which I've played a couple times, and every time that is just more tense than it has any right to be. But it's also because it sets out the different endings quite clearly. Like, you go in knowing if you fail this, they're going to rise up against you and probably kill you, and you can either choose to put different characters on the throne, blah blah blah. Whereas this, it was like you just show up at the Crooked Man and there's people.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to talk to these people. There aren't really clear stakes. Besides, I really just don't want the Crooked Man to get away. So it doesn't feel quite as authentic, I guess.
And then you have the chance to put him in the witching well, or rip him apart as the big bad wolf, or let Auntie Greenleaf fix him. And I liked that you had that decision, but I ultimately think that decision was pointless when he attacks you.
Yeah.
Because it was totally against everything that the Crooked Man had been. He was always calm and collected and everything. And I didn't like it that he was suddenly like, I'm going to fight you now. And now you're going to be forced into a decision. And I feel like, also, if you decide to kill him, it kind of almost absolves you from guilt of that decision if he attacks you. And it's like, then what's the point of that decision in the first place?
Yeah. I totally agree.
Wow, we're totally tearing into this episode.
I know, it's like we tear because we care.
Exactly.
It's a good season, and then it was just, Yeah, did you throw him down the witching wheel? That's what I did.
I didn't. I spared him.
I really wanted to see what the tear his head off option was, but I didn't do it, and I felt that was a little bit against what everything we were building that episode.
Yeah.
So you did spare him. Did you get the option to spare him again after he tried to kill you?
Yes.
Okay, so what happens?
Auntie Greenleaf turns him into a crow. Yeah.
I love it.
She was like, he has a way with his tongue, so I decided to get rid of it. And
nice.
Now he's in a little cage. So yeah.
That seems like a very appropriate ending.
Yeah, I really liked that.
Yeah. There was, because they do that sometimes in the comics, like a Big Beast siblings. Don't they turn them into goldfish or something?
I don't know. I haven't gotten that far.
Oh. Spoilers. Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, I just threw him down the witching well. I figure Flycatcher can deal with him.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like I was so exhausted with the lack of answers I was getting that I wanted to. And that's another thing that I just want to reiterate. It's this murder mystery, and this is the last episode, and we just kind of get the runaround, you know?
Yeah.
We don't really get solid answers anywhere, and that was really frustrating for me.
Mm-hmm. And especially with the ending reveal with Nerissa.
But first, we're just gonna...
But wait, there's more.
Yeah. And so immediately after that, you have that kind of moment with Snow, and she's really busy. And what did you do anything? Did you say anything? I said, "Are you okay?"
I think I did that too.
But
I didn't ask to speak with her or something because I didn't want to be that dude that ditched the line.
So she hands him the keys to Flytrapper's car that's going off to the farm. And I really wanted to say nothing because I thought that would be more dramatically just a really nice kind of moment. But I didn't. I don't know why. It was weird. I was just kind of like, I need to make a decision.
Yeah, I couldn't use silence there, but I used silence a lot during the episode. Mm-hmm. Especially when Snow was, giving her speech in the trial. I did not interrupt her. I think I used silence a lot when speaking with the crooked man. Anytime he'd ask me something, I was just like, nope, I'll just stare at you. And I think I might have even used it with Georgie a little bit. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I found silence this time was I used it a lot. But one of the things we discover when we go to give Flycatcher his keys Toad and TJ are going to the farm, despite the fact that we gave them money for glamours.
Yeah.
Which was kind of unfortunate. Again, considering this episode was just so full of stuff, it probably would not have fit. But Freckled Mask, she had an awesome theory in our comments. Basically, we both chose to give money to Toad so we can buy a glamour last episode. Mm-hmm. But she had an idea, what if you didn't give Toad the money, he would go to the Crooked Man for a loan. And it would be interesting to see how that would pay off, which it doesn't look like we'll ever see that.
Yeah.
Even if he's a crow.
Well, maybe if people didn't do that, maybe that's what happened. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's brought up, or maybe he's at the trial or something. I don't know.
That would have been a nice kind of hook in to see the Crooked Man's operation and how fables do have to turn to it, because so far we've been kind of introduced to fables that work with the Crooked Man and fables that don't. Mm-hmm. And Tiny Tim we inherently sympathize with just because he's Tiny Tim, whereas I think might have been more narratively satisfying for Toad to make that switch and just having seen firsthand the poverty he lives in and his struggle, and then this is his only option. I think that would have been a really, really interesting avenue to explore, and I'm sorry that Freckled Mask does not work for Telltale.
Yeah.
Because that would have been awesome.
Yeah. And then, there's the goodbye with Colin. I gave him all of my cigarettes. I was just kind of like, oh my god, I'm so sorry. Especially considering his fate in the comics. I was just like, oh god, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was a little bittersweet.
Then we have the great final conversation with Nerissa. Mm-hmm. Which...
What happened?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
So what was your interpretation? Because I left that what?
So during this conversation, she's like, I left Faith's head on your door because I knew you would do something about it. And then there's that weird when she say you weren't that bad or whatever. And then he kind of has that flashback moment of Faith saying it and then the doctor and everything. So my interpretation is that Faith died before the first episode started. Okay. And that was Nerissa in the glamour as Faith to get sympathy from Bigby before she gave him the head.
I've read that. And I think that's what they're going for. It just seems weird to me. Was part of her plan to be beat up by the woodsman?
I guess so.
That just seems too serendipitous. Okay, I'll get beat up by the woodsman. Toad will call the police. Then I'll get to have this moment, and then I'll put the head on his doorstep. Mm-hmm. It's perfect. That could possibly go wrong.
I feel like she would know the buttons to push, especially being Faith's friend and seeing as the woodsman was a customer.
Mm-hmm. But the woodsman wasn't her customer. The woodsman was Lily's customer. Mm-hmm.
But they were all kind of in together in their little circle. The thing that I like most about it is that it kind of draws this really kind of dark and really sad idea that, a dead sex worker is more, compelling to action than just a sex worker.
Mm-hmm. She has to be dead to be interesting.
Exactly. Like, to do something, you can see them on the corners and not do anything, but if there's a head on your door, it was just really kind of sad, but also knowing that Nerissa knew the game and knew what she would have to do to fix this problem. Like, that was what I found to...
I'm going to add 2 things. 1, this is another thing that Riviere Nightingale totally called. She wondered what the significance of them both asking in episode 1 and episode 4, do you like my ribbon? And these lips are sealed with the same inflection meant.
Yeah.
It turns out they're the same person. Another idea that I've read, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are, is if the roles are switched. If the Faith on Bigby's doorstep is actually Nerissa in a glamour, and Faith is actually alive, which would go with the donkey skin girl myth of her hiding in a cloak, or cloaking herself to get away.
Ooh. I feel like they both kind of bring to light the same idea that I was trying to articulate and failing at.
Mm-hmm. And The Little Mermaid is about transformation, too.
Yeah.
So, I guess this dashes my hopes of season 2 being about Cinderella.
Or maybe she's going off to Europe and Bigby has to send Cinderella after her.
There you go.
See? All comes back.
There we go. Okay. It does make me want to play the next episode. Even though we've kind of ragged into this one, I am looking forward to season 2 and how it all ties together.
Yeah. Overall, I had a lot of fun with this series. And the only reason that I'm so disappointed and that I am kind of like railing into it, it's because I love it and because of how much fun I had and how high my expectations were. So, like, this isn't me saying, oh, this was shit, this undoes everything.
This is not just... BioShock. On a scale from 1 to BioShock.
Yeah. I know you can do better, and I'm hoping that you succeed next time.
I have an overall question for you.
Yes.
In our very first water cooler, we talked about how we were kind of wary of Snow's characterization in those episodes. She seemed kind of naive for who she is when we first meet her in the comics. And I was wondering, in light of everything, especially after episode 4, we really had to either side with her or go against her on her kind of by the book rulings. And then in this episode, do you still feel the same way?
I feel like this is a turning point for Snow. I feel like if the next season is still set in Falbletown, which probably it will be, I do think we're going to see a lot of change in Snow's personality. Because she kind of starts being the kind of no bullshit character that we saw in episode 4, but it was in a way that we didn't really want to see it, you know?
Yeah, which definitely, like I think I said that episode, there is value in that. It's still just, I really enjoy it, but it still seems kind of off.
That was the thing, is that it just felt off. So thank you for joining us on this, somewhat long-winded but necessary conversation about all things Wolf Among Us. Obviously, we didn't go through all the avenues this episode, so please let us know what you saw that was different, what you thought. Were you disappointed? Were you not? We'd love to hear your opinions. Join the conversation in the comments and let us know. And subscribe to keep up to date on all of our latest videos and discussions.
Why not mention this before?
No one asked me.
Buffkin!
And I'm hungover. I'm sorry.